if the CCP collapse, like one of the challenges will be make sure that China just doesn't become another Russia, where it's like still a lot of old communist people are in charge and it's very corrupt.
I think that is tough. Like, you see a lot of post-communist countries have a fairly tough transition.
Yeah, it
Not
depends.
all
Some
of
have
them,
done well.
yeah.
It would be interesting to really dive into what makes one post-communist country do well versus another. I remember hearing at the Oslo Freedom Forum, like maybe it was Sergej Popovich, but anyways, like the sort of like a Nuremberg trial kind of thing, where you like purge.
Yeah, if
the
you just
top
let
communist
the
officials.
people still be in power, but
Then they're
nobody's
still in
been held
power.
accountable
Yeah, there needs
for
to
what
be.
they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about East Berlin and East Germany and how essentially, like, everything the Stasi did, right? Like, they set up these, like, you could go into the Stasi offices and look up your file
Yeah.
and see what they had on you. Like, it was just like kind of all exposed. And I think, yeah, you're right that would make a huge difference in terms of whether a country is able to recover from the level of kind of like lying and manipulating and like corruption that comes along with the communist system.
Yeah. I mean, how has Ukraine done in the last 30-something years? It's also struggled with a lot of corruption. But they did have like a couple revolutions that, Russian Federation didn't have, where like people are taking to the streets, right?
To try to get a less corrupt, terrible
corrupt system.
system.
Although what's funny is that Zelensky, essentially his political career was kind of based on this show, the TV show where he was like a school teacher who got elected to president because of this clip of him talking about how bad corruption was. And like the whole show is like him, like the comedy show as him as president fighting against this huge corrupt machine, right?
Well, don't you know, Matt? That's disclosure. That's how they do it. They always lay out their plans. The global elite, they lay out their plans in a movie, and so that they get people used to it. Like, that's how come there was a movie Contagion that came out, and then there was a pandemic, and that's why they put out Dune, because they're all going to get us addicted to spice, and then we're going to have space worms flying around the planet.
I have to admit, the space worms were kind of cool.
They were kind of cool. They're pretty cool, especially riding space worm.
Was there space worm riding in like the 1980s Dune movie?
Oh yeah, I mean it's in the book. So.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were called sandworms.
Or sandworms, yeah, you're right.
What did we call them?
We said space worms.
Space worms. I mean, they're worms in space. I prefer to call them space worms. I prefer to call everything in space worms. All right, quick digression because this was just so stupid.
Uh-oh.
In the new Star Wars, the Acolyte. God, this was so stupid. There's like one of the main characters, like her job is like on a spaceship, I repair stuff.
Uh-huh.
And so like something happens where like she has to put on her spacesuit and go outside to like fix something.
Uh-huh.
And like part of the spaceship in the vacuum of space is on fire. It's like a little crackling little campfire in the vacuum of space. It looks so terrible.
Is it an oxygenated area of space?
Maybe the oxygen's coming
It's
out of
space
the
fire.
spaceship.
No, it's
yeah.
I mean, you can
space air.
You can like I believe the way that they handle rockets in space is that they're injecting oxygen, right, so that the fuel can burn. So if there is a mechanism for that, but the oxygen has to be
Coming
released
from the spaceship.
From the spaceship,
Yeah.
right? Like it's an intentional thing.
But yeah, and it did not look like there was like, like some kind of like oxygen release. Because it was just, it's like they put like a little campfire on it. It was just like in one direction. It looked really bad.
Doesn't Disney have so much money? What?
Well, you need to have writers intelligent enough to be like, fire in space.
So it also goes up.
Yeah, it goes up in a direction. It looks awful. And this isn't an IP that was based on like bad rubber alien masks, and those look better than this.
I mean, they had the Jim Henson do like Yoda, so.
Yeah,
You know.
I'm thinking like Mos Eisley Cantina, first one where it really was like they raided some Halloween costume store and just.
But I mean, that was a good movie.
Yeah, it was. That was saved in editing, but that's a story for another day.
That is, yeah.
But yeah, that's disclosure. They're telling us that actually space is full of oxygen.
And
how I got
worms,
there.
oxygen and worms.
It's a deadly combination. The global elite are trying.
What were we talking about before disclosure?
Oh,
Matt.
Zelensky, because he was on the TV show.
I think one of the things about that TV show that I can't remember the specific plot line, but it was like he had, as president, like promoted this like local official who he thought was like uncorrupt to head this organization and like root out the corruption. And in the end, it turned out that the local official he appointed, she was actually like the most corrupt of them all.
Disclosure.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I think that just shows some of the frustration people have with dealing with that type of
post-communist government.
Corruption.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, to bring it back, like that's the danger that mainland China faces, is just like the entrenched corruption. And I would say it's the entrenched corruption plus 3 generations under communism, where people there isn't, like, you lose that intergenerational knowledge of like what it's like to be free.
Yeah, I mean, like there was specific campaigns to like propagandize and ideologically educate Chinese people for decades. That's going to be difficult to get around.
When your grandparents don't even remember what it was like, well, I mean, your grandparents remember now, but like the still, like, it's very difficult to break out of that, and your whole life is just like, if you're under communism for like 20 years, it's much easier.
Well, I mean, also they killed a lot of people. Like, my grandparents are dead now, but like they did technically grow up not under communism, but also there was a lot of bad stuff happening in China at the time.
Oh yeah.
Like I think a big thing that the communists did was that they like killed the intellectual class, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, my grandparents were like mostly peasant farmers and miners. Like they're not like people who are thinking about how to like have a just government. You know what I mean?
Upholding the culture.
They're just people trying to survive. And so if you kill the people who are the ones who are thinking about like how do you have a just government, or like we're part of like these student movements to try to like get accountability from the government or whatever, then essentially you've killed all the people who were willing to stand up and be like, you know, the same thing with, I guess, Tiananmen Square, right? Like one thing that happened was they didn't just like massacre like idealistic students. They killed people who were trying to demand better from their government, and then essentially scared everybody else into never demanding anything from their government.
They massacred hope.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in a way. It's interesting how the CCP still now, 35 years later, has to like lie about what happened, and they cannot let people commemorate the massacre. They still are putting out a lot of misinformation about how there was no massacre. Like, because it's called the Tiananmen Square massacre.
There was no massacre, but also the students attacked first.
And most of the people who died were soldiers, actually.
Yeah. Actually.
So, but like there's some technicalities. Like most people in the square were not massacred, but a lot of people were killed in the like Changsha Avenue, like the avenues around the square. And so they can go around being like, there was nobody killed in the square, but there were people killed.
Asterisks.
Technically not in the square. But yeah, I remember, I think we had played a few years ago a news package from a BBC journalist who was in like Beijing the night that the soldiers like started like attacking the students, and then like there are gunshots, there are people running by with like you know, dead people on the back of bicycles, like, you know, you can see like the scene in the hospital with like all these people lying in the hallways and things like that, and it's like, yeah, that's the kind of stuff that the CCP would rather you not remember.